Right now,
Today
50.
we'll tackle tough times in
The
California.
economic troubles facing San Diego will be the focus of Mayor Jerry Sanders' annual State of the City
reports
address.
a 60% hike in rapes where either one or both people.
UCLA researchers tracked the progress of 50 sarcoma patients using
From the KPBS studios, this is San Diego Week.
Good evening, I'm Allison St. John. Thank you for joining us. Governor Brown's plan to balance the budget has imploded. We'll speak with a Republican and a Democratic member of our state assembly about why and what's next. San Diego is one of 40 cities around the state to adopt new rules rather than ban medicinal marijuana dispensaries. We'll find out where they can and can't be located. Health officials acknowledge what a KPBS investigation revealed. The whooping cough vaccine may not protect us for as long as previously thought. And trees in San Diego's beautiful backcountry are dying. We'll have a story about what's killing them. Plus, an interview with the director of Win-Win, a sports film that's not about winning. That's all coming up on San Diego Week, but first, the headline. Amitha Sharma joins me from the KPBS News Center. Amitha, there's a little bit of good news coming out of the state capitol.
There is, Allison. California's 3-year drought is now over. Governor Jerry Brown formally rescinded the drought declaration this week after an abundance of rain and a thick snowpack have put the state's reservoirs at above normal levels. Brown, however, says it's critical that Californians continue to conserve water. A San Diego police officer accused of asking women for sexual favors during traffic stops is now facing more charges. The additional charges against Officer Anthony Arevalos include assault under color of authority and receiving a bribe. The charges were filed after 2 more women came forward with accusations. And negotiations between Governor Brown and GOP lawmakers over the state budget collapsed this week. Governor Brown plans to take his pitch to extend billions of dollars in temporary tax extensions to the public next week. He is warning of deeper cuts to education and public safety if the taxes are not extended.
As we just heard, this week, Governor Jerry Brown said he's given up negotiating with the Republicans to support a June ballot measure. It would have asked voters if they're willing to extend taxes to help balance the state's crippled budget.
Unfortunately, even though we came very close, there are issues that I think are impossible to resolve at this time.
We have Assemblyman Nathan Fletcher and Assemblywoman Toni Atkins with us. Thank you both so much for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Allison.
So, Assemblyman Fletcher, let's start with you. The Republicans did have a very good opportunity to get at least a lot of what they wanted because the governor really wanted your support. Right. But you've ended up with nothing. Why couldn't you have reached a conclusion?
Well, it's a fair question, and it's a good one for the governor who left the negotiating table. I think all parties need to return to the negotiation table. California has a budget deficit we're all aware of, which is really the symptom. But there's an underlying problem that's causing it, and that's that our state government is broken, our economy is broken, we're not a competitive place. And so I think it's important to not only treat the symptom, but to treat the underlying problem with real structural reform. Things along the line that were just mentioned, pension reform, some common sense regulatory relief, some budget reform, and a real effort to get Californians working again. And those are the types of things that need to be included in a comprehensive solution. You can't just have temporary taxes and temporary cuts. We need to structurally solve this problem, and I think all parties need to go back to negotiating to try and find a solution.
So, Assemblywoman Atkins, you have just joined the Assembly, but you've had many years of experience on the City Council and you know a lot about pension reform. Why couldn't the governor design a pension reform proposal that might please the Republicans?
Well, I think the governor has a plan and has a proposal, and I agree that we do need to be back at the negotiating table, that he does need to do that. But he's laid out a pension plan. He has plans for reform. I mean, I think he is looking at structural reform and changing government as we know it. He talked about it during the campaign, bringing government local back to the people. That's the whole realignment proposal. It's going to take a while to put into place. He talked about no new taxes without voter approval. These aren't new taxes, and it's an extension to allow us to work with the economy that is slowly starting to improve with the additional time to see that we can right the ship. So I think he's offered some extraordinary reform. But we've got to meet each other halfway, and I agree. We still have time to do that, and I think we need to do it.
Well, we wanted to find out what people on the street are thinking about what's happening with the budget and whether they would support a temporary tax extension. So let's take a look.
I do believe there has to be a consensus going forward, but at the same time, some people have put themselves in positions to where there's no way to make amends, and as a consequence, sometimes one has to draw the line in the sand, and unfortunately, I support the governor with regard to that.
I would vote yes to temporarily extend taxes to bridge the gap as it stands in the state budget, but temporarily.
So now the governor has already signed off on $11 billion worth of tax cuts, which, will go less than halfway to solving the budget. So, Assemblyman Fletcher, how can the Republicans justify things like $1 billion of tax breaks for big companies when schools and even public safety and services for the disabled are being devastated?
Well, you can't justify any tax breaks, and you shouldn't be asking for them. But what you should be demanding is a hard look at the way the state operates. We need to ask the difficult questions, like why is it today the state of California has 12,000 more state employees than it had 1 year ago, despite the fact that almost every small business out there I talk to and meet with says we're working longer and harder with fewer people to do more. How does the state do that? We need to ask questions like why we have one of the highest incarceration costs of any state in America. We really need to look inside our state government and say, how can we make it function better? How can we make it work harder? How can we make it more innovative? And that has to be a really important and critical part of the question, because the voters are not going to step back and say, when we've made sacrifice and we haven't seen it in terms of the size and scope of state government, they're not going to be willing to go along with that, and we have to make sure we're doing everything possible so every dime is spent as efficiently as possible. The cuts are real, and they're having a real impact on our schools. They're having a real impact on people's lives. Increasing taxes has a real implication as well. It's President Obama a year ago who said the worst thing you can do in a recession is to raise taxes because it has a devastating impact on the economy and on small businesses. So all of the options are difficult and bad. But I think we really have to focus on the structural reforms to the state and restoring confidence. The public has confidence that they have a state that's working hard.
Okay, well, Assemblywoman Atkins, the Democrats, I understand, one of the options is now to try to get a ballot on in November for the tax extensions. How would that help this budget, though?
Well, it wouldn't help in the short term. I mean, we've gone a long way earlier than the process normally has taken. We've done 11.3, I think, billion at this point in cuts, and that's why we need to go back to negotiating what is possible and compromise. I do believe that the governor has laid out reform. He has laid out a plan. He has asked for a 5-year extension of a vehicle license fee that was cut at a time when, we really needed that. That $40 billion would solve our budget deficit today had we continued that one fee and tax that was already in place. So I think the governor is asking citizens, he is not unilaterally saying increase taxes or extend. He's saying you decide. And so I think what he's asking is for Californians to work together, Republicans and Democrats and citizens, to work towards righting the ship. And I think we need to give him the opportunity to make that case to the public. And we have 75 days. We have started earlier. If we're not able to come to some resolve quicker, and we don't know what all the options are right now. They are looking, the governor is looking, leadership is looking at what all the alternatives might be in lieu of having to wait until November.
Okay.
So,
well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. We hope that you make some progress in the near future, and I'd like to thank you both very much for coming in.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
California saw the worst whooping cough outbreak in more than 60 years in 2010. More than 1,000 people were treated for the disease in San Diego County. KPBS and the Watchdog Institute at SDSU spent months investigating the epidemic and found something surprising. Many of the people getting sick had been previously immunized. This week, a conference of government health officials asked questions about this very thing. KPBS reporter Joanne Ferrian joins me now. Good to have you with me.
Thanks for having me, Allison.
So tell us about this conference.
Well, this was a national vaccine conference. A number of health officials from various states, including investigators from the CDC. In fact, and one of the things they were looking at, of course, was our pertussis outbreak in California. I want to give you the title of one of the presentations at the conference. It was called, "What's an Epidemic Like This Doing in a Highly Vaccinated Community?"
So what did they have to say about this fact that people who've been vaccinated are still getting it?
Well, CDC investigators, along with health officials from the State Department of Health, gathered data last year. They came to San Diego County, other counties, and they collected the data on who was getting sick, how old they were, and their immunization status. Actually, much the same as our investigation with the watchdog last year. What they found was this, that in the groups of children who are quite young, 4 to 5-year-olds, the vaccine was as high as 95% effective. 6 to 7-year-olds, it declined slightly. 8 to 10-year-olds, it went down further to about 81%. So what they saw was protection declining as kids got older, even despite having 5 doses of vaccine. I want to say this is preliminary data. The CDC stressed this as well, but it raised the question of how long are you protected once immunized? When does immunity wane?
So is this the first time that scientists have discovered data to suggest that immunity might be waning?
Well, not really. There have been research in other countries that have suggested this. In fact, in the Netherlands, last year I traveled to the Netherlands to interview a Dutch scientist. He works for the government. The Netherlands went through a similar outbreak of pertussis in 1996, so they had these same questions. So they've been looking at this for the past 15 years, and one of the things they zeroed in on was waning immunity and a possible more virulent strain of disease that is making that immunity wane sooner. So I want to show you now something from Dr. Frits Moy. He is the Dutch scientist, and he explains his theory in this clip.
When the immunity is suboptimal, what will happen is, first of all, the bacteria will not be recognized very well by the immune system because of the mismatch. And second of all, even though immune response is started in the body, the toxin will be able to delay it. You could say that these two changes work together by decreasing the period in which the vaccine is protective further.
So, Joanne, people may be wondering, is the vaccine going to protect them?
Well, the CDC said this in their presentation that in fact, their data was reassuring, that it did say, look, this vaccine works. The question is, how long does it work? So they're going to continue to look at their data, clean up their data, and do more research. They want to stress that immunization is still the best tool against diseases like this. And in fact, their study did show that among most age groups, it's highly effective.
And is there any evidence that there might be a new strain at work here?
Well, there is, in terms of other research outside of the U.S. In fact, Dr. Frits Moy, his research has really been focused on this new, more virulent strain. At the conference, officials from the California Department of Public Health actually had a presentation asking why do we have more pertussis? More than 30 years ago, it was nearly wiped out. Now we have thousands of cases in the state. How come? One of the reasons listed on their slide in their presentation was, is it a more virulent strain of the disease? So that's still a question that's being pursued by scientists.
So you're going to continue reporting on this, I understand.
Oh, I'm sure we'll hear lots more about it. We are seeing a lot of new study into this area now.
Thanks so much, Joanne.
Thanks, Allison.
More than 200 cities around California have either put a moratorium on medicinal marijuana dispensaries or banned them outright. This in spite of the fact that California voters voted 15 years ago to approve marijuana for medicinal purposes. San Diego City Council is not banning them. This week they adopted regulations for where medicinal marijuana dispensaries can and cannot be located. Here to tell us about the new rules is Chris Catalago, who covered the story for the San Diego Union Tribune. Thanks for being with us, Chris.
Thank you.
So tell us, where can the dispensaries not be located?
They cannot be located in most commercial areas and as well as residential areas, and they can be located in some commercial and some industrial areas.
So the original proposal was that there would be a 1,000-foot buffer zone between them and churches and schools, and that was reduced to 600 feet, right? How did Council Member Todd Gloria manage to convince his colleagues to make that change?
I think what his colleagues were thinking and what they said in their on Monday was that probably the more important part of that regulation was the being in limited commercial and industrial areas. The buffer zones match up with the new state rules on that, which apply to schools and alcohol vending operations. And so I think that they wanted that to be in line with the new state rules.
Okay, so under these new rules, how many dispensaries do they estimate could actually operate?
The original estimate under the 1,000-foot ranged anywhere from about 5 to 30. We don't know exactly how many it is now, but some folks have thought it would give a little bit of wiggle room and may create a couple more areas where they might be able to open up.
So now you sat through 5 hours of testimony. Were there more people down at City Council wanting to get rid of the dispensaries, or more people wanting to loosen the regulations?
I think most of the folks who wanted the regulations loosened acknowledged that some regulations should exist, but they thought that these would be too onerous, and thought that the access to medicinal marijuana would be too limited if the original restrictions went through.
Okay, so we have a lot of medicinal marijuana dispensaries currently operating in the city, and we visited one in Mission Valley and spoke to the manager, and here's what he had to say.
We would never be able to raise the amount of fees that they're talking about, even at the 11,000 mark that they're talking about for a fee. And so those ordinances are going to put us out of business, but more concerned is the patients we've been serving, which is the only reason Nick and I got into this. We won't be able to serve them anymore. Most every one of our patients is a 4-stage cancer patient. The cannabis will replace close to 9 different pharmaceuticals that these patients are taking, which allows them to respond to the chemo or the radiation treatment much quicker, and their blood levels come back up quicker. So to take that away from a cancer patient at that stage, it's just not right.
So I believe he was actually in Mission Gorge, close to the hospitals, which I thought was interesting. Now, what about the license fee? Because it's quite high, I understand, and he seems to feel that's prohibitive. What kind of fees are we talking about here?
Well, in the county, the license fee, I believe, is $11,017, and I think that's an annual fee. The city has not indicated which direction it would go. The budget analyst did indicate that cities such as Oakland and some others have fees that are on a sliding scale depending on how many members they have and how big their operations are. So we'll just have to see. What the City Council has done is put some language in these ordinances that would require the dispensaries to let the city recoup their costs for what this might cause them to expend in enforcement.
So you mentioned the county. How do the city's new regulations compare with the counties? Because some people say the counties was like a de facto ban.
And some people still believe that the counties are a de facto ban, and what they'll point to is the fact that over the last since last June, when they were approved by the Board of Supervisors, only 3 potential dispensary owners have applied, and one of them is getting closer, and the other 2 I think may have dropped out, and there was originally 16 areas of the unincorporated county where those can operate.
So that one has proved to be very restrictive. We'll have to see how the city regulations work out. Well,
Definitely.
Thank you so much for coming in and filling us in, Chris.
No problem. Thank you.
There's a killer in San Diego County. Its prey, oak trees. KPBS environmental reporter Ed Joyce takes us to Cuyamaca Rancho State Park, where the gold-spotted oak borer has already wiped out hundreds of trees.
I'm sitting on a 200-year-old coast live oak, now dead, killed by a pernicious beetle called the gold-spotted oak borer. It's not the only dead tree nearby. Biologists refer to this collection of dead oaks as the boneyard. These aren't the last trees to fall victim to the beetle. At risk, hundreds of thousands of iconic coast live oak trees from San Diego County to Oregon.
This is typical of a lot of the injury that you'll see in the area, these very large diameter coast live oak, which is its favorite host.
Entomologist Tom Coleman says the beetles have a voracious appetite for the oldest and tallest oaks.
When the beetle initially will move into some of these stands, this is what it's going to attack first, and it'll slowly move from this larger size class to the smaller size class.
Coleman says the beetles choke the tree, keeping nutrients from getting to its roots.
What really killed this tree, it's the larval feeding, and you can see this on the kind of wood surface here, all this kind of scribbly lines, this meandering feeding pattern. So basically what the beetle does is almost girdle the tree, and you'd get the same effect if you were to come up to the tree with an axe or a hatchet and just take all the bark off.
He says the mature gold-spotted oak borer beetles lie dormant in the winter, waiting for warm weather. In spring, the adults do minor feeding on the trees and lay their eggs that, over time, kill the trees. Coleman says it's these tiny offspring which cause the big problems.
The larvae are really the damaging agent that are killing the trees. It's not the adults, it's the damage from the larval feeding that girdle the tree and cause the mortality.
Damage to the base or main stem of the coast live oaks is what tipped Coleman and others to the beetle's presence.
So much that the bark will just kind of slough off like this.
The crown or tops of the trees is another sign. It takes several years for the trees to die. Dozens of trees have been killed here at the Green Valley Campground alone. Park-wide, the numbers are in the hundreds.
All the large trees in this picnic area have died, most of them in the last 5 years. Most of them before we even knew that there was a problem. These trees already had the beetle and had begun their progression towards death.
And these trees behind us are going to likely meet the same fate?
If you look at the trees behind us, you can...
Thomas Scott with UC Riverside says the gold-spotted oak borer is not native to San Diego County. How the invasive species got here isn't clear. The best guess is the oak borer hitched a ride in a load of firewood brought to the county from Arizona. Scott and others have been meeting with communities throughout San Diego and other nearby counties, warning about the potential dangers lurking in firewood.
Is that if you buy firewood that's green, or you transport firewood that's green to the area where you live and you have oak trees, chances are in a year or two you're going to start to see your oak trees thin. And then you're going to start to see the kind of decline that we have in the scene behind me right now.
The coast live oak is a hardy tree, but Scott says it doesn't have a natural defense for the gold-spotted oak borer.
And it's a striking thing to see a tree that can go through catastrophic fires, droughts, and have survived for 200 years in this unpredictable climate to be waylaid by a beetle that's less than a centimeter long.
Scott says researchers are studying ways to control the beetle, but for now, there's no way to eradicate the pest, and the potential for widespread devastation is real.
The line in the sand right now is urban Los Angeles. If we don't stop this beetle, and it makes that jump across Los Angeles, it won't stop until it gets to Oregon.
Writer-director Tom McCarthy won acclaim for his first two films, The Station Agent and The Visitor. He continues his indie film success record with Win Win, starring Paul Giamatti and newcomer Alex Schaefer. KPBS film critic Beth Accomando spoke with McCarthy and Schaefer about bringing the character of Kyle to the screen.
Action! Filmmaker Tom McCarthy has a knack for telling stories about real people. His latest film, Win Win, looks to a high school wrestling coach struggling with hard decisions and a troubled star athlete. One of the first challenges was casting the role of teen wrestler Kyle. McCarthy first looked to professional actors.
And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? I'm not getting the quality I want. I think I need something raw here, and it would be really helpful to the production if this kid could wrestle.
I don't think we can teach him anything.
My friend texted me and he said, you should audition for this role. And my initial response was like, no, because I mean, this is wrestling season and I'm focusing on wrestling. And I'm not going to say I didn't want to do it. I just didn't think that I had the time to really, you know, go out and audition for a role for acting. It's something I never did. It was like I wasn't really interested in it, you know? But then he told me it was like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I thought about that, and then I became interested, and I was like, yeah, it really is, and I'll never get the chance to be in a movie again, so why not just go out and audition?
Did you reach your mom?
Yeah, I told her I was coming home.
Or did she want to talk to me or anything?
No.
This very sort of shut down, monosyllabic character, teenager that we all know and love so much, which is really difficult to bring to the screen, actually, because you run the risk of the character being very flat. And I think he found a way to be, in his directness, be very charming.
If I want to smoke, should I go outside?
You shouldn't be smoking.
I know, but if I do.
Although he's very quiet and reserved, there's still something, the mind is working under there. You can kind of see it happening, which I think felt very authentic to us.
One thing that I find interesting in particular is that when I'm wrestling, I'm always putting on a show for people. I want people to watch me and say, wow, did he really just do that? Or, oh my God, how did he do that? I want people to like watch me and be like really interested in my match. And I guess that's what I want with me to be on screen, is I want people to watch me and say, holy crap, this kid's good at acting. You know what, I just want people to enjoy me, you know?
My feeling is when audiences connect with characters, they're gonna go for the ride. They're gonna believe in it, and they're gonna enjoy that experience. And I think it's been really fun watching it with audiences and see what they take away.
Win-Win opens today in select San Diego theaters. And now here's Amitha Sharma with an update on what KPBS is working on for next week.
Coming up on KPBS News next week, we'll hear how foster kids are generally left destitute. Once they age out of care, some of the children could have nest eggs if the state did not confiscate their assets. And on these days, on the one-year anniversary of the Mexicali earthquake, we'll find out why some victims remain homeless.
Thanks, Amitha. You can comment on any of the stories that you saw tonight by going to our website at kpbs.org/SDweek. We'd love to hear from you. And now here's a look at your weekend weather forecast. Thank you for watching, and good night.